Our final speaker for this evening is Karthik Rashida, CEO of Bespoke Data Insights. Karthik is a freelance management consultant who solves business problems using a data-driven approach. Karthik spent the last year at Mint writing a column for Mint. He's also with the Takshila Institution, a public policy think tank. Karthik, all yours.
Can I have that the column mic? Prefer to not be stuck in one place. Hi, my name is Karthik Rashida. I'm a freelance management consultant. I mean, it's been 3 years since I've been in a job. My last job was at Goldman Sachs. I used to work as a quant on algo trading. Anyway, so one of the things that I've been doing in the last year and a half is to analyze elections and write about it for Mint. I don't have a presentation unlike the other speakers. So, because one of the things is that the others who we have met today are all doers, if you can put it that way. Viral was part of the Nandan campaign. Shashi was part of the BJP campaign. Anand actually created that whole website for CNN IBN. I haven't done anything except for writing a bunch of articles in Mint covering the Indian elections. But let me use this opportunity to take you through what it is like to be an election analyst in India. So perhaps in, it was soon after Obama got elected for the second time, maybe in the end of 2012, I was like, wait, who is this Nate Silver guy and why can't I be like him? I looked up some of the things that he's done. He's like a former management consultant, check. Good at math and stats, check. He has done a bunch of stuff for baseball. Okay, I was developing something for cricket, check. He's interested in politics, I'm very interested in politics, check. So I'm like, okay, maybe I could be like this guy. So what happened was it was in February of 2013 that I kind of treated some 20 people for coffee at this, there was this coffee shop on Church Street that doesn't exist anymore, but like, so I treated them for coffee, asking them, what can I do to become like Nate Silver? What does he do? And how can we adapt what he does for India? So that's when the things started coming out. Firstly, what Nate Silver does is he analyzes polls that are being conducted by other people. So in order to do something like what Nate Silver does, you need to have good quality polls conducted by other people. Now in India, you probably have like 4 or 5 kind of agencies that do reliable polls, reliable in an Indian context. The amount of disclosure of the data in each of these polls is absolutely abysmal. Go to the websites of any of the media organizations that publish the results of these polls, and it's going to be very hard for you to find whether they have disclosed how many people they have polled at all. Even if you manage to find that, it will be like, it would be after a fair bit of effort. CSDS, which does the polls for CNN IBN, is perhaps the only organization that's upfront about the methodology and the number of people it puts out. So in terms of, if you look at this as the metadata, I mean, the data is what the polls themselves have. But if you look at the metadata for polls in Indian elections is extremely bad. So that's one thing. Second, the quality of the polls. I mean, about 6 or 8 months back, I think there was a sting operation on C-Voter. I'm sure most of you who kind of even vaguely followed the elections would have seen that. Now, how do you know that these polling agencies are reliable and they are not just making up the numbers as they go along? Then again, you have some agencies like Aam Aadmi Party conducted their own survey before the Delhi elections. I mean, I'm sure most of you might know that. And they put up the results, the entire data file online. Brilliant. But you can't expect everybody to do that because that might be giving out too much information. So at least what we need here is something like some kind of a industry body for pollsters like what you have in the US. I'm sure there exists one here, but they don't do much. But at least certain standards such as how many people did you talk to? What kind of people did you talk to? Were they representative of the entire population? Things like how, what does the raw data say? And things like that. So those are some of the things that can really help you kind of make sense of the polls that are already there. So that's one of the big reasons why, by the way, in October of last year, one of the columns in Mint, I wrote, there cannot be any Nate Silver in India, just to take that out of the way. Though after these elections, there were some people who said that this is a very interesting agency called Chanakya. I think you guys might have heard of it. They managed to get the results of both the Delhi elections in 2013 and the general elections this year right. Now the interesting thing with them is that they were far away from the consensus. The consensus got these elections wrong, and that their vote share data that they disclosed. I mean, this is some data that at least everybody tries to disclose this, like what is the vote share among all the people whom we have polled according to that, etc. So that's some data people disclosed. That didn't tally with the number of seats that they disclosed. So for example, I think this is what it is, like the vote share that they gave the BJP in Uttar Pradesh among the people they had polled was far less than the vote share that somebody like CNN, IBN had given. But on the other hand, these guys forecast a lot more seats for the BJP than CNN, IBN had. So there was always some mystery about it. So I concluded that there can only be two ways. Again, bimodal distributions are something that I'm quite fond of. That they've either been absolutely lucky, they've just pulled numbers out of a hat and they turned out to be right, or that they have been much smarter about the entire polling process compared to the rest of the people. Okay, so coming back to why you can't have a Nate Silver in India. So first I told you about the fact that we don't have too many reliable polling agencies. Second is in terms of the quality of the polls that they do. Third is in terms of the quantity of the polls. In the US, when you're leading up to a presidential election, every week or so, there's somebody or the other will be doing an opinion poll. It's almost like every agency does a poll a month or twice a month, and there are a lot more agencies in the US than there are in India. So what that gives you is a large amount of data. So you might have seen these cool graphs in Nate Silver's analysis where he's like, okay, this is how each week I updated the odds of Obama winning. Such a thing is never going to be possible in India because of the frequency at which polls are done, the frequency at which, and then the delay between the time when a poll is done and the result of that is given out and so on. So one more reason why we can't have Nate Silver in India. Third, the Indian political structure. Now the US with the presidential structure is very simple. It's very easy to figure out with a small sample who is going to win, because they have, you can call it, they have 50 constituencies because each state is in itself a constituency. So by figuring out who is likely to win in which state, you know, you can predict the elections. In the UK, they have a similar Westminster structure as ours. They have a larger number of constituencies and they need to, larger number of small constituencies, and they need to predict for each constituency. But the thing with the UK is that you have a few safe seats. There are some parts of the UK which only vote Labour. There are some parts that only vote Conservative. So in the UK, what you can do is you can kind of lay down each of the constituencies on some kind of a number line from the most conservative leaning to the most Labour leaning. Of course, in the US also you can do that. You can, you might have heard about Ohio is going to swing the elections. I mean, like those of you who follow the US elections might have heard of Ohio being the key state, because Ohio, what people have done analyzing the past data is that like there is a particular set of states that always vote more Republican than Ohio, and a particular set of states that always vote less Republican than Ohio. So if you can figure out where Ohio is voting, you can project for the entire country. Now, I tried doing this for India. I tried to see, are there any such constituencies, bellwether constituencies I called them, which always return a particular party? Unfortunately, no. So in terms of the big challenge for kind of predicting elections in India is in, I mean, there are 2-3 challenges. First is in terms of polling itself. You need to find a reliable polling agency who will go interview as many people as they said they are going to interview. Okay. Second, once you get the data, you need to figure out like how you're going to like analyze. How do you turn the vote shares into seat shares? So if I tell you tomorrow that BJP is going to have a 40% vote share in Karnataka, what does that mean in terms of how many seats the BJP will get from Karnataka? Now, okay, you can devise a lot of different kinds of formulae, but it again depends on like, because the way the vote share translates into seat is more on the distribution of it. And how can you capture the distribution using a survey when you have such a large number of constituencies, right? So the way the Indian political system itself is geared, it's not really conducive for analysts like me. And then once in a while you'll have new parties coming up, like Aam Aadmi Party. What were people like me, poor analysts, supposed to do when you have a new party that comes up and gets close to half the seats? Because you have no history of how the party has done. You have the opinion poll data to go by, but if the opinion poll says the Aam Aadmi Party will give you 25% of the vote, will get 25% of the vote, how do you know how that 25% is distributed among the different constituencies of Delhi? Because that is what is going to decide how many seats it gets, rather than the total number of votes it gets. Just to give you an example, let's say there are 70 constituencies, like in Delhi, and a party has got 20% of the vote. There are two extremes. In one extreme, in 20% of the constituencies, the party has got all the votes, in which case it gets 20% of the seats. At the other extreme, it has got exactly 20% of the votes in each of the 70 constituencies, in which case it gets no seats. Somewhere else, it could have got, like, in 50% of the constituencies, it could have got 40% of the vote, which would have again given it an absolute majority. So this whole aggregate number of total vote share has absolutely no bearing on, with just that data, there's very little that an analyst can do. So that is another challenge that I faced in kind of trying to predict the elections. So we had the political structure, we had the new parties, and then don't get me started on the independents. So last year, one of my early successes, if I can call it that, was that, like, this was 2 days before the election results were announced for the local elections in Karnataka. I wrote an article in Mint saying that the Congress is going to get an absolute majority. This was a little more, this was a little different from what most of the other agencies who had themselves conducted the exit polls had said. They had all given the range such that it was on either side of the magical 112 figure, because saying that whether the Congress got the majority or if it fell just short, they could say that they got it right. So based on their data, I tried to figure out what to do and figured that the Congress is likely to get an absolute majority. But then my calculations almost went undone, because I think about 15 seats in the Karnataka elections last year, I'm not sure of the number, went to independents. And independents are again, like, extremely hard to forecast. Analysts don't like independents, because how do you model for independents? Independents are not a political party. If it's a political party, you know that, okay, if they get so many votes, this proportion of their vote is normally from this region, that proportion from that region, and so on, and you can do some kind of analysis there. But with independents, how do you model it? What if you have not even sampled from the constituencies where the independents did well, right? So it's a huge mess in terms of how we are going to forecast. Okay, so going forward, given this, what can we do to ensure better election analysis and forecasts in India? First thing is, the political system is a given. We can't go and say that, like, oh, as election analysts don't like this first past the post 540 constituency system because it's, like, too complex for us to forecast, so please change the system. Obviously, that's not going to happen. So given the system, how can we forecast better? So first thing, one thing we can do is in terms of the quality and quantity of polls. I've mentioned this before, I've written this twice in Mint. So it's basically about the polling agencies need to get more credible. Now, it's not about getting credible based on whether they're getting the data right, but it's more of taking steps such that you can trust them. If they say, for example, just saying that we sampled so many people in this particular state, and we give these vote shares with this margin of error. Just giving that margin of error is a huge step forward compared to where the polls are now, right? So the polls, secondly, polls need to get smarter. Like, for example, one reason I think Chanakya managed to do well, as in one of the two modes that I mentioned a while back, is that they managed to poll much more smartly than the other people. Other people, so even before an election, there's a lot of information that you have. So for example, just consider these two statements. If I say that BJP is going to get 40% of the vote in South Delhi, Statement number one. Statement number two, the BJP is going to get 40% of the vote in South Madras. Are these two statements, is the information content in these two statements the same? How many of you, so consider the two statements. The BJP is going to get 40% of the vote in South Delhi. That's statement number one. Statement number two is the BJP is going to get 40% of the vote in South Chennai, right? So which of these two statements has a greater information content? First one? Why do you say that the first one has more information content than the second one? I said South Chennai, that's also a constituency. Yeah. Why would you say that? Precisely. So the thing is, it's a known fact, or it's known common knowledge that the BJP has never done well in Chennai. I don't think they've ever really competed in any of the constituencies in Chennai. So the information that if you do an opinion poll and find that the BJP is going to get 40% of the votes in South Chennai, that has a much larger information content than a poll that says that the BJP is going to get 40% of the vote in South Delhi, which is probably what you've expected all along. So instead of blindly kind of distributing your survey in terms of, okay, I need so many volunteers for the state, so many in that state and so on, what if you can be a little more smart about it and use the prior knowledge that you have? From my analysis, apart from Chanakya, nobody in the Indian election sphere is really doing that. Nobody is really kind of doing the polls smartly. Now, one reason why I say that the Americans have really got it right when it comes to election forecasting is that Nate Silver, who is not part of any polling organization, I think during the 2008 elections he was independent, and in 2012 elections he was part of the New York Times. Neither of them commissioned any polls. As an outside analyst, he could take other people's data and make sense of it and actually come out with pretty accurate forecasts. The test of a surveying and forecasting system will come when other people can use your data to come up with better or equivalent as good results as you. And currently, we seem to be a long way away from that. So there are steps in place. I know of a few new political consulting or setups that are coming up which say that they're going to do the polling more smartly, and like people say that they're going to do like what Nate Silver did. But I mean, unless we see more better data disclosure and more better surveys in the future, it's going to be really hard for us election analysts. So in conclusion, I go back to that piece I had written in October 2013 to say that in the near future, it's very unlikely that we are going to have a Nate Silver in India.